Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me now. Well, oh wait, this is a one-way thing, isn't it? I was trying to see if a crowd was going to respond because there's no live crowd for
Yay,
LCS this year, but that's not the LJL, ladies and gentlemen. One and all, welcome to the LJLOU Podcast, Season 2, Episode 28, Take Number 2. MaskedSwan, Initia1ise and Nymaera. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
I'm all right.
How are you, Nymaera?
I have been hit by an absolute... Okay, first off here now, I did change the audio track, so what happened with the last one shouldn't happen to this one.
We might actually have a functioning audio
We might
track
actually
once
have
we
a
start
functioning podcast VOD
Maybe.
ones. I have no idea what changed.
Can you check the VOD, Hina?
Yeah, because someone make a quick
Please, I don't
clip
know how to
to
do
see
it
what's happening.
again.
Okay, so basically last time we had this wonderful podcast where we actually went through a lot of good stuff, and it didn't work on the recording of it, so we didn't get to keep that. But yeah, I got hit by an absolute truck of second vax side effects. However, I'm glad to have taken it, and given certain news which has started cropping up, potentially that leaves me in a good position to travel to certain events for the first time in a number of years.
We might all be frantically getting reels together and everything, but who knows about that? Who knows? Who knows?
So yesterday and the day before were pretty scuffed. I did have a cast booked in for yesterday, but I had to back out of that because I just was not up to it, but I'm feeling much better today. I'm glad to be back on the podcast with you guys.
Nice. So, we've all now been second vaxxed, or is Sam?
I don't think Sam has.
I'm still waiting. I need to move mine forwards. Still, that's what I need to do. So it's booked in, but for the unfortunately distant future. So I'm trying to find a time to pull it back in. I've been avoiding it the last few days because I've been a bit under the weather. And I'm thinking, you know what? I don't want that on top of this. Thanks.
Yeah, and while Nymaera died with his vaccination, I actually did probably my best hosting ever. So I mean, it buffed me up, and it half killed Nymaera. So I don't know.
It's still completely worth, like, just saying.
Built different.
Maybe.
But at least we're all safe and sound. Gentlemen, how outside of vaccinations, what have you been up to? Sam, I know you've been participating in a lot of socializing and weddings, celebrating.
Yeah, 2 of my friends got married over the last week, so I've been to 2 separate weddings. It's been very good. Not great for my liver's healthiness, but largely.
Oh, I think it can recover, sir.
Yeah, it's been a fun time.
And what about you, Nymaera?
What have I been doing? Well, I've been trying to actually play some more League again. That's one thing. So obviously I haven't had as many casts, especially since the EUM stuff finished, UKL's finished. Like, I've had a lot more time, so I think, all right, okay, I have played between Flex and solo queue 20 games because I've just done placements in all of them. That's all I've done for like 8 to 10 months at that point. So so I've been trying to play that a bit more. I've been playing on stream as well. I've been trying to sort out what the hell's going on with my PC to actually stream said games, because Streamlabs has not been treating my PC very kindly recently. I've moved over to OBS, and that's been better, actually. So, as far as I can tell, it's just a Streamlabs problem compared to OBS. So, in fact, I'm probably going to be streaming later today, in fact, but I've been doing a bit of that, trying to get some content rolling, which isn't just casting, so I can diversify my content output. And I've been enjoying that, actually. I have been enjoying that.
Nice. I mean, on that kind of whole train, I've been playing a huge amount of Road 96. I was very excited for the game when I saw it at E3. It came out, greatly disappointed me.
Nice.
While at the same time, some of it, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. But I'm actually planning on doing a whole thing. I've recorded all of my gameplay, and whenever I stop playing for a bit, I sit down instead of typing out my thoughts, because that's just not how I work. I basically sit with my with Audacity and just record my thoughts out.
Audacity.
I mean, it's still great.
Yeah, I
know. So I'm currently in the process of potentially producing some form of video and like review of it, because it's got some really interesting mechanics and stuff. So
yeah, I saw like your video on MTG stuff on Twitter as well, and it's like,
oh mate, do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
Well, no, maybe as a card.
Maybe that's the thing we do for a side podcast thing. But I also like, it's good to see you doing some stuff. Just diversifying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Completely. Especially as I can't do the whole streaming malarkey at the moment. So I still miss streaming. I want to be streaming almost every other day, but hopefully I can get back to it over the next month or two, and then be good. But yeah, this is an LJLOU podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This is a weekly podcast where myself, Initia1ise and Nymaera, we come together and we talk all things LJL. We are the LJLOU, and we founded this shindig about almost 2 years ago now. To this point.
I mean, considering that like off season is like 4 to 5 months, and it doesn't count, technically it's 2 years of games, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Well, we're almost at the precipice with finals. That will be a full 2 years that we can put a stamp on it and be like, we've done that. Yeah, we've got a lot to kind of recap over this one. We've already spent the opening few minutes where we just kind of do our normal shindig stuff. Obviously, Nymaera, what would I like people to do on the YouTube department?
Well, sell your soul. That's the first thing, because you're not allowed to exist on the internet whilst having an incorporeal form. The only, the form of life you're allowed to have outside of, the biological functions you have is a digital function. And Bezos is most pleased when you do give up your mortal shackles. No, you'd like to like, subscribe, and comment. That'll be also pretty okay. That's like a secondary thing, but if you can like, comment, and subscribe, it's all right, maybe do that, please.
What would I like people to do on their audio podcasting platforms, Initialize?
What you need to do is plug your headphones in to your digital interface of choice.
Of
You need to log into or just open, frankly, you don't need to log in, your podcasting software of choice. There's quite a few of those at this point. At which point you need to search LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, or just LJLOU, or just any number of things like LJL. You probably turn up at this point. Actually, we're into the engines.
Pretty much do now.
And you're gonna go and listen to every single one of the backlog of our episodes.
Okay.
Really digest what we have to say, and then you're gonna tune in to this one as well, and really, really dig into it. And after that, you're gonna give us 5 stars, give us an amazing review, and do it on all the other versions of the podcast as well, because you're that kind of super fan. And maybe we'll like, I don't know, so something like really nice for you. Maybe we'll like shout you out or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that people, if they did that, they'd probably be for a short period of time more knowledgeable in the LJL than any of us, because they've become so condensed with knowledge. Oh dear. But we are the LJLOU, ladies and gentlemen, and we are excited to bring you this podcast episode. This week's podcast, because we lost one to Twitch, and we also decided to have a week off because we can. And then we also couldn't get our schedules organized the other week. So like for one time we accidentally missed it. One time we wanted a break, and then Twitch decided that we're not allowed to have a podcast unless you came here live last week, and that's why you should always come and watch our podcast live over on our Twitch page of LJL Officially _Unofficial. But if you're not, it's always available on YouTube and those audio stream platforms that we already mentioned to you. Gentlemen, this week we've got to cover our last week's episode. We've got to do a super condensed version where we recap round 1 playoffs. We also got some news we've got to cover, as well as also talking about that Juggernaut match, which was pretty huge. Obviously, full spoilers. If you haven't watched anything, expect we're going to tell you everything. So this is going to be a great catch-up mechanic if you're anyone's in there. Talking about catch-up mechanics, Worlds is now in Europe. The world is caught up that Europe is the superior region, even though our country decided to leave the European Union. EU was too strong for Great Britain, apparently. And gentlemen, what's your first reactions, outside of my memes? Worlds moving to Europe.
So I've done some thinking on this, partly because I've written an article or 2 on it already.
Crazy.
I know, right? Might be my
Jinx.tv.
Anyway, that's the one with a G, yeah. But basically, the large part of the reasons for it is basically the schedule, I guess, the time it takes to actually get a hold of a visa to go to China in a minute from certain countries is a hugely extended process. I believe some teams would have had to start back in something like February. And they wanted to do the whole Worlds event over 5 days, over 5 cities.
I thought that was just a thing that VCS was talking about Worlds 2020. It was the February thing. That was for VCS. So that was for VCS Worlds 2020. Like, we would have had to like start applying for visas for like summer split, Worlds qualification before spring split started. So I don't know what's happening with the visa thing for China this year, though. I don't know whether that was just like a more conflated. between the
believe
two.
that's still in place. That's not changed. Partly because the COVID situation is still pretty tricky. At which point they're going, okay, so the situation would be similar as last year, and visas look potentially even more difficult, especially with Delta variant making a lot of Chinese officials quite wary, potentially quite rightly so, honestly. So it's like, okay, so we can't do it across the load of cities. We can't even hold it in China's looking really difficult. We're gonna have to move it. At which point, where is the best location? Europe probably comes up towards the top of that list, partly because the vaccine rollout here in Europe and the UK, I suppose, to put that in as that kind of bracket, has been largely a little bit more efficient than in other parts of the world. You say the States, which is still struggling like sub 50%.
Well, remember LCS had
vaccine.
to cancel their finals in New Jersey.
Yep, and they're still sitting around or just below 50% adult vaccination rate, I think, which is really frustrating for them, I'm sure. And obviously, there is also the other thing is on top of that, there's an element of Europe has already shown across multiple disciplines they're capable and willing of putting on big international events with crowds in attendance. The Euros, big one. Riot held MSI and the Valorant. I believe it's got the Stage 2 Masters was the one they had in Reykjavik as well, obviously.
They're doing VCC Berlin as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing, of course, is that the LEC's in Berlin. So you've got the personnel are already here, along with the broadcast staff and equipment. So you have got, actually, you don't have to worry about, oh my God, how on earth do we broadcast when we've got stuff in place already, which does take a lot of weight off the table as well. So quite a number of reasons it's basically gone, okay, so China's looking very unfeasible. Europe is looking significantly more so.
But what I found, so just a little bit of information, because I've heard some whispers actually, which I'm not sure has been like particularly talked about. There is actually some talk that Riot are maybe not choosing to go to somewhere like Germany or France because they don't want to hold it in the same place over and over. So I have heard whispers of places like potentially Ireland could be a place where they hold it,
I can see that.
and a place like Croke Park, because that's a place which hasn't been. I believe they're in a situation where they're not booked out for a while, and they need the money right now, so potentially on short notice that could be a location where it goes to. I don't know whether the UK is a likely place for it to come to. It'd be awesome for us if it does, but we have got a lot of stadiums where we could shift things around. Effectively, at this point, is going to be a lucky dip as to where has availability for the length of time that Worlds needs to be. So that's going to be the very difficult part, which is also why they didn't announce anything in that first video with like, oh yeah, it's going to Europe, sorry China, effectively. I think that they're still assessing options at that point. I think that the two, I believe it was Fionn from the old ESPN crew, I'm actually not sure where he's at right now, tweeted that they are thinking of...
Challenger, I think he is. Or am I wrong with that? Challenger Uprising?
Challenger Uprising, that sounds about right, something like that. Anyway, famous figure within the journalistic scene, I suppose, said that it was potentially between Belgium and Reykjavik again. Not Belgium, sorry, Berlin and Reykjavik. So I was looking at chat, and it's like, oh, Belgium, and like, no, that's just me conflating two words. But yeah, there's I have heard whisper that potentially Ireland is on the shortlist too. Either way, this is the kind of thing where suddenly I'm like, maybe I can fly out to that at a reasonable cost and stay in a hostel somewhere. So you might, if you end up. It depends if you've got a live audience.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to do live audience regardless.
They might do for finals, but then it's just lucky dip on tickets.
Yeah, probably right. And it's only going to be like 200-300 or 500 or very. I mean, just looking at the public perception, this isn't football as well, right? Like we do have to start like rein in and understand where we are in the world, especially in Europe. And while in some countries League of Legends is like a legitimate like big grab, like in Korea and China, League of Legends is still mocked by other generations on social media for being a sport. And that in the UK, if you suddenly go, okay, well, you guys had Euros, trying to convince people that a live final of more than a few hundred, even 1,000 people is safe and should happen is a weird one. And I just wonder the general public's perception if they suddenly found out that a video game is getting a finals with a live crowd.
That's why maybe the UK potentially with its lower regulations and stuff is going to be kind of
probably
there's a lot of different
another option, exactly.
Yeah, I mean international scrutiny would obviously be a thing. And I mean,
but it already had that for the Euros, so what's another?
The thing is, like for myself being, at the point being double mask, I'd be wearing a mask and socially distancing at that point. I'd be happy to go to a live event.
Wearing a mask and gloves. That's what I would be.
For sure. I mean, it's very exciting that there is the potential for there to be a live finals, or live portions of the event, and I would love there to be so. Safety always takes precedence. But either way, potential chance to meet up some of the EU crew and international crew as well. I mean, at that point, it's like, if it ends up happening in London, I'm like, hey guys, need an LJL expert to come rock up at the stage?
Yeah, just like giving notes on the side for anything. I mean, yeah. I mean, they for sure have been letting some people some people come to the studio, I know. So I mean, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, good point. In Belgium.
I'm actually very excited to see. Obviously, I'm biased, but like again, it's interesting because obviously, most recent episode of Hotline League, a lot of, obviously it's an NA focused podcast, and they were like, "Oh, guys, this is the world's on fire. We're never gonna get a worlds again." I mean, I'm just gonna say the controversial thing with the player numbers and everything else. Does NA really deserve to get it?
What, the world?
They've got the smallest viewer. Yeah, of course they should. They'll still deserve to have it. But should they have it? They have the smallest viewership. Surely LATAM would make more sense.
So there is a real problem with league perception of league within NA. It's got a huge, like you're saying, it's got a low player base. It has a low ranked player base amongst that player base. League of Legends has occupied this spot really within it, maybe in NA, but less so. I mean,
I'd love to know the difference of player numbers between Valorant and League of Legends just for NA. But yeah,
I know that in NA it's kind of like it's the biggest game not talked about really. It's kind of like this. It's very insular in its own way. In Europe and in the UK, a lot more people openly talk about and communicate about League. I think that a lot of the perception about League in NA is very different though. So that's not something which I can kind of really speak into as much.
None of us could really.
I think the thing about NA is that it's closer to a lot of the operating offices. It's the main thing, really.
Plus, I think I think there's some really cool locations.
Imagine
in
if they went to Brazil.
It's still like one of the major regions.
Imagine if they went to Brazil for the fans.
Yeah, Brazil would be quite a cool one as well. I think in some ways Brazil would be better off in terms of for something like an MSI. I think the problem with something like a World is generally they like to move around with it, and I think there is an element of like esports infrastructure probably isn't as in place in a wider area of Brazil than it is, say, in the States, where you can guarantee relatively high, fast internet connections and the rest of it. Even if you are on land, you still want.
They do have a few good studios now, though, obviously, and obviously
true.
the Brazilian broadcast has obviously increased. I just don't know. I agree with you. I don't know what the wider infrastructure is.
And going like how wide it is, because I mean, obviously, if you're in Rio or Sao Paulo or that, you've probably got some options, but. Maybe I'm being unfair there, but that would be my one initial worry. Going like, I wonder how wide you could spread the event.
Yes, absolutely. It'll be important to see where it's going. Obviously, the future of stuff. But I mean, I don't know. Oh God, I'm getting sent a link from Hina. I think for all of us to read from Tom Martell. Oh God, worlds colliding. I always forget he works in League Esports now. Oh God,
yes,
what the fuck? The fuck did I just send you guys? A bunch of numbers.
Wow, you sent us your credit card details. Incredible.
I wish.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you, Lexi. There's going to be a dull moment in the events business. It's going to be crazy month, but I'm excited to help and deliver another amazing Worlds for our fans. I'm really hoping for COVID-free event planning cycle for Worlds in North America next year. So at least Tom Martell, an American who really wants to push it, like at least he wants to try and at least.
I mean, that was my understanding. Was it would probably be Worlds in NA next year? Was from all the rumors I'd been hearing from behind the scenes is looking most likely.
Okay, so let's just say so 21 is now Europe, 22 is NA.
And then it's probably China, then Europe again.
Well, it has to be Korea.
So it's going to be like another 4 5 years before we get it back in Europe, actually. Probably.
Yeah.
So that means that, which is, but then I'm kind of sat there like, oh, well, we might get an MSI in Europe again, and during that time.
We probably would, but then at that same time, I mean, I think Europe definitely deserves it with just LFF. Like the amount of viewership and
Prime
LFL,
League.
thank you.
Prime League,
and Prime League, and with all the recent changes coming in the UK, which is definitely a whole thing in and of itself for us three.
I mean, I will say that I'm not a massive fan of saying, we'll have it in this area because this has the most viewership. Like, I think at that point you start because actually there is something about going to like we could have one in Australia or into a digital, because they're never going to get a Worlds necessarily. But like, go in a place where there are, dedicated fan bases in regions, or VC, or in Vietnam.
Yeah,
great place for it.
And apparently, the events in like Athens were really good for the finals. I'm not sure about the other days of the event, but apparently the day of the finals was really good. Sam and I in 2016 went out to Krakow for the EU finals. In 2016 summer, absolutely fantastic event. Absolutely loved that. All of these places you can, it's good to almost draw an eye to a different area of the world and different fan base, and I think that's a power which the League of Legends community has right now, because it is so widespread.
Wow. I think we could keep going, but we're not going to, because we need to move on to our other more relevant piece of news specifically for the LJL, and that is our discussion around Muujin. I believe, Nymaera, you know this probably better than what I'm going to just do the Cliff Notes version, so you go ahead.
So, just context on this. Everything which I'm saying has been publicly said. I'm not speculating at this point. This has been said either by multiple people in the community or on stream, and there is video footage of it. Effectively, Muujin was not playing for V3 in the first round of playoffs, and because of various reasons, effectively on the tweet on the day from V3 said, effectively, he's just not playing and Unica's coming in. What we have seen from Muujin's older brother's stream is that he said that after Ace tested positive for COVID, I believe that test was not one of the official Riot Japan ones. So because it wasn't that test which went wrong, there was something in place. I'm paraphrasing that a bit, but effectively the situation led to Ace tested positive for COVID. However, due to something to do with the logistics, the rest of the team and the players didn't have to take tests themselves. So Muujin was afraid of being infected by COVID because, of course, it seemed like it wasn't the most rigorous process at that point, flew over to Korea and went back home because his brother said, basically, we don't care about the results of the tournament right now, just keep yourself safe. That's what we had heard. Of course, this is all from Muujin's brother's perspective. I don't know whether that's a PR thing. That's just what we've heard at that point. And what we have seen now with a tweet from Reiner in the last 24 hours is saying that, because V3 made an update, I believe yesterday as well, where they said that Muujin was still with the team. He still belongs to V3, he's still contracted to them, and is still part of the organization. They can't play in the next round match, which is, of course, very important because they did progress from round 1 against the Hawks, and we'll go on to that in a little bit later because we have to recap all the round 1 matches. But they are practicing remotely, but they can't play in this match, so Unica will still have to come in, presumably, and play that match. V3's Academy team is apparently incredibly scary right now, and that makes a lot of sense given how Unica and UG are both subbed in and did very well for themselves, which does soften the blow somewhat. Still a big change, though. That just adds some context to what was happening with Muujin. The fact that Muujin is still technically on the team and all this other stuff signals the fact that maybe there has been an agreement reached and that discussion has been smoothed over. But just add that into context, because if anything, any news comes out about Muujin in the future, just add that in as context.
Okay. Can I just jump in on this one as well? Just a quick point of clarification. Just I'm a bit curious. Do we know why he can't play in the next round? Is that just because
he's in Korea?
He's
in Korea.
So I wasn't sure if he was going to be back.
He flew back.
I wasn't sure when he was due back or so, or whether he could be quarantined.
I can fill that in.
Yeah.
I can fill in a tiny bit extra. You have to have a Riot referee with the player, and the player has to play with the full team in person if you're doing remote play.
Right.
So
okay. So
that is the reason why it's so frustrating for him specifically in that scenario. Obviously.
Anyway, so effectively, Ace tested negative at first, tested positive later, and Riot still, let them play, and the rest of the team didn't have to take tests. Muujin got freaked out by that, flew back home, is currently still in Korea, might fly out at a later date, but that's currently the situation. So he's practicing remotely with them, but isn't with the team. So that's the Muujin news, so keep that in mind with all V3 stuff coming further from that.
I mean, I've got a reaction to it all.
Go for it.
I've got a spicy fucking take. This is not the first time, ladies and gentlemen, in a 1-year period. Yes, take a sip, Alex. You're going to need to for this. That V3 has had disagreements with their Korean imports around health concerns regarding COVID. I think you'll all remember the mysteriousness in which Boogie and Archer left the team at the end of Worlds. I'm just saying things out loud. I'm letting everybody else piece the dots together. I'm not saying any more about that, but that's just my hot take. I'm like, well, if I look at this and I look at this, weird. It's pretty weird if you ask me. But whatever.
I heard a couple of things about Boogie being a bit of a flamer himself, a bit toxic. Potentially it was a bit more. I don't really
his
have the
Twitter
most
sometimes, dude. Like,
I mean, things are like I've seen his. I mean, like I love Boogie as a player and I love him as a streamer too. When we were watching all the super server games, that was really really cool. But I think that in this case, from that perspective, what was said on Mugen's stream, and the fact that we haven't had any other information, so that's our point of concern right now, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to add context to what actually happened there, but the fact that someone could test positive for COVID and the other players not have to test, I think that if that is the case, that is quite worrying. I can understand the reaction from Mugen at that point, even if it did go against contract.
100%.
I can understand the reaction there. So I mean, hopefully everyone is still safe. Obviously, Ace came down with it, and then he's been okay since, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, bit scary.
Very scary. And that actually takes us over into our playoffs match between V3 Esports and the Fukuoka SoftBank Gaming Hawk. Very quick cliff notes. We've almost always had a 5-game series in the first round of playoffs. We did not get that for either of these teams. It was a 3-0-3-0. We're going to be kind of framing this more in the subject of looking at the winner of this series and kind of the questions that we have for them moving forward and what we think the matchup is going to look like, and kind of frame it in that way as opposed to kind of doing our breakdown that we normally do for a series, because, well, though the episode that we did for that isn't here anymore. So that's what we're doing here.
We did talk about it. It's just not now. It's just gone now. You have to pretend. So, if you saw it live, you were part of a mysterious. You were a part of an elite.
You crazy. You crazy.
You mad lads.
Like Timo and
V3...
Hina, you guys are part of that VIP crowd. No one else ever hear it. It's like the art you burn when you're done with it. It's that kind of stuff.
Oh god, that's no, you're not. You're right. You're right.
Temporary.
V3 Esports have actually got a playoff buff initialized. Thoughts on that one?
It's pretty good. I mean, so they went against the Hawks, who I think didn't turn up as strongly as we hoped, unfortunately. But on the other side, I think V3 looked a lot more composed than we also expected in turn, and that was with Unica involved. So it was a 3-0 to V3, to clarify, but games 1 and 2 were very close fought games. Very close fought games that could have gone either way. They both went over 40 minutes. Game 2 was 48 something. Hollow and Zenit kind of dueling it out so who could carry harder on the AD carries and all the rest of it. And in the end, it was V3 who came out on top. And then the last game was a lot more of a decisive fashion for V3. So yes, I think they came in looking better than we expected. But for all that it was a 3-0, that doesn't tell the whole story. It was a relatively close 3-0, especially the first 2 games.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the closest 3-0s that we've seen. I think that, of course, we're not going too deep into it. I think that the key players to highlight are probably, well, Unica was our player of the series because of, effectively subbing in on short notice, coming in.
And having a cracking 3-0.
Having a good series, actually. It's a 3-0. And Tussle, as much as we've memed on him for spring, had an okay split this summer comparative to that. And Unica was still more than fine, had some good ganks, particularly, I mean, in the first game, he's playing at Diana. You know what you're going to do on Diana. You're going to full clear until you eventually team fight. But later into the series, on his volley bear and his Trundle, he did very well at that. And then besides that, I think on the other side, I looked towards Dasher, who was in a position to carry and failed to really follow through with that. That was a bit of an issue because he was the only person who was really looking like they were in a position to carry besides the one Aatrox game from Afferman in game 2. And the Hawks couldn't team fight well enough from ahead or from any sort of advantageous position, really. I mean, I think particularly in game 2, when they were
really long, our longest game ever of the LJL, 48 minutes.
48 minutes this year. It's the longest one this year. They overpushed. They were trying to push in side lanes. They overpushed. They didn't clear out vision to do that, and they died horribly. So I think that the Hawks sadly weren't very cohesive, and they got torn apart.
Yeah, I mean V3 on just I was really impressed because we saw almost every single player of the side of V3 playing a different champion, which just shows like a flexibility. And while okay, two of their games they basically played very similar comp ideas, I would say arguably game two and game three, your execution is very similar between these two teams. You just happen to be kind of flicking out an Ezreal for a Ziggs. Now that is fundamentally different. I'm not saying it's not, but the other parts of the teams were very similar. So it's like, okay, we've got a bit of flexibility with ways in which we can play team comps. Their game one team comp, you've got a Diana in there, so and you've had a Jinx as well. So that's just a drastic difference from the others. It's really exciting to see this because it seems like V3 and a player that we used to harp on to the cows came home, gentlemen, Reiner, suddenly woke up, and it's so good because it seemed like when he woke up, the whole team, Cog could do these 4-man ults a bunch again. Hollow just was never touched, and Hollow went from kind of, man, I forget that Hollow's in these games, to, man, watch Hollow. He looks so sick at the moment.
The one quote I remember from the now Lost to the Winds and to Twitch VODs episode that we did was you said, Lexi, wow, this feels like kind of, you know, like 2020 V3, this feels like peak V3 again. And I literally, my response to that, because I hadn't really thought about it at the time, I'm thinking, actually, yeah, it kind of does. And my response to that is literally just, because Reiner's playing well. Like, if Reiner's playing well, it brings out the old V3, because he's always got a finger on the pulse of, when he's at his best, he does have that finger on the pulse of win conditions and when to find the correct fights, and he did that all the way through that series. So that is now actually quite a threat to track going later into playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, like, and you know, like, that really shows up in Hollow's numbers as well, who had like 1k DPM across the series plus, which is very impressive.
Yeah.
And when you've got that kind of addition, it takes a lot of weight off Cog's shoulders, who I think has probably been the most consistent member of the team, even during the slumps, at least in my mind. And that's great for him because obviously he's been very good at points, but it's nice to have someone else around to back you up, especially as the games go kind of later on. I think often as a top lane on things like your efficacy can sometimes boil down to how good your teleports are, if you know what I mean, rather than like, aha, I am late game Jinx, you know? And again, I generalize a bit there, and that's not universal.
Of course, you have to a bit.
So like those are some really good things. I also think that Ace had a better series again. He'd been a little bit of a liability, and you know, and don't get me wrong, I still think Dasher played pretty well. He put up some good numbers and stuff, but it wasn't the, oh my god, this is the second best mid laner in the league Dasher performance I was perhaps necessarily expecting.
Well, I just remember the Galio from game number 2, Initia1ise.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So yes, I think, you know, Reiner stepping up brings Hollow up, which takes a lot of pressure off the top side of the map. So yes, generally speaking, I think V3 turned up to play with more than just one member, which is good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to end it out, Corporal from that interview that we were able to conduct with him gave us the lovely quote of, on the day, V3 played better. It was unexpected. We were improving week to week. I genuinely believe that we have a higher level to show than what we did. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, but I mean, it'll be lovely to hopefully see Hawks and obviously Corporal re-flourish and be a phoenix, even though V3 has got the phoenix. So, Axis Crest Gaming boys, Honey is the king, man. But is he actually? Because he didn't even win MVP. Like, man, bruv. Axis just, God, Crest Gaming Act isn't any good without Arya. I'm going to say it. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it. But you don't have the clutch factor anymore. But there's a lot of reasons for that.
Okay. All right. Let me paint a picture for you. So again, I wasn't there for this series. I think this might have been that series when I was at a wedding. So I was...
No, you were playing at a wedding.
That's right. I was on a stage. I was playing music. I had another gig.
Humble brag.
I know, right? I know. But like, I came out to look up these scoreboards and I went, huh. Those are some picks to give up. And I was looking down the bottom and go, Honey got Jinx. Nemo got Thresh. Hoglet gets Viego. You got a Gnar in there. There's a Zero. So that's a pretty good comp with a lot of power picks. What did CGA get in response? Oh, Trundle support with Misfortune, and then a Kha'Zix jungle.
But Nymaera, what were the name tags on that bot lane?
Very true. It's Milan and it's Nation. It's Nation support. Like, okay, so like quickly going through like my cliff notes for the series. Because again, like we don't have all the time in the world to go through the series, nor do I think it's actually a series that we can really go into that in depth, because it was Nation playing at support with Kaito coming to mid lane once again. Kaito only played Zoe for the entirety of the series. I don't know if Kaituri, even in the games that they played in regular season, played anything besides that. Actually, I'm trying to remember if they played Zoe as well there. They might have played like one other champion at that point, but they've only played something like 2 champions in
I meant
LJL.
to know that, and I don't actually know that. I'll be honest.
So
they one game of Syndra as well.
So there's that, and CGA.
Right,
Oh
okay.
yeah, the one game of Syndra. Okay, and then also the other thing with CGA is that we saw this in 2020 as well, but they do not know how to do anything but team fight. All they do is go mid. All they do is commit to a 5v5. So if you out 5v5 them in the draft, well, that's it. Good job. Occasionally, they can get the Miracle Team fights. Occasionally can. Normally, that's due to Nap and Alchemy finding their way onto the backline in a really efficient manner. And they couldn't do that in this series. And it's also into a Thresh, who is one of the best peel Fury AD carry supports in the meta right now, very, very strong. And this is the thing which I was talking about with Kazu on Twitter, actually, coach of DFM, because he does speak good English, and he's a really, really nice guy, actually. And he also, after MSI, he's talked to us a little bit here and there. Where, his
that humble bragging you just accused me of, by the way, Al?
Huh? Oh, I was kind of like I was kind of attributing. Oh, wait, what do you mean? When did I accuse you of humble bragging?
I'm
when did I do that?
He's memeing, buddy. He's memeing. Don't worry.
Move on.
Fairly sure I haven't done that this podcast yet. But one thing is that Kazu was saying, and also similarly talking about this with someone else connected to the LJL as well, is that when you have teams which are communicating multiple languages, which is of course what CGA are doing, makes it very hard to very efficiently communicate your more difficult engages and your rotations around the map. And if you're doing that into an already difficult situation to engage into, well, good job, you're screwed at that point. That's exactly what they did in that game 1 and there on out, really. Game 3, they didn't have to play against the Thresh, but they still weren't at the level to take down Axes at that point.
This just was the series where we ended up giving Nemo our MVP for this series because his Thresh hooks were just so clean. And then he played one game with Leona, and it was really, really solid. And honestly, it's kind of the thing throughout that series. We saw Honey play 2 games of Jinx, and then the side of Chris Gaming Act go, yeah, nah, we're not going to even allow them. Ziggs was a continuation, always banned from Chris Gaming Act, was an interesting evolution. But the fact is, Honey and Nemo then brought out the Ezreal Leona lane and just did just as well. If not, maybe you could argue Megumin then got his LeBlanc, which was a huge ban contention. And the fact is, Axis were being held back from Crest Gaming Act because they were like, no, you can't have these really powerful things. And then they're like, we can't beat you with your normal things. Have your powerful things, and let's try and figure something else out. Oh god, it's even worse. Oh god. Oh god.
What's going to be hilarious actually is that obviously we have a lot of hyper carries in the LJL. I would imagine, what I would hope to see from the LJL, we're unlikely to see it because we're not very good at innovating on meta over here, is that I want to see people let through Ziggs and counter it with Vayne, because Vayne's actually is one of the champions which can have insane kill threat onto a Ziggs in a laning situation where you tumble past the initial skill shot and then you just run them down. Because your move speed towards nearby enemy champions means that you just get to kind of run them down, especially with your ult. And then once you start playing like these heavy dive team fights onto the backline, Vayne takes Cleanse, takes Wit's End and a shield bow. You don't get to kill them and they turn around the fight. So you have a real ability to just outplay Ziggs in most situations at that point. I've been hearing that across multiple professional players' opinions too. So I wonder if we're going to see that in the LJL, particularly because we have a propensity towards hyper carries in the bot lane.
Yeah. Good itemization against mages into good rundown on people like
Wit's End
Ziggs.
is so strong right now. So strong.
Shield bow, Wit's End into Ziggs, I think would be really good for them. Yeah, I see it. Absolutely.
I also think there is an interesting thing that I just wanted to kind of place here. The Axis have a very defined playstyle. They know how they like to play this game. I was listening to Riff Reactions with Emily Rand and Travis Gafford. Emily, God, she's just a fountain of knowledge.
Absolutely.
And she made the opinion. She made the statement. Rather, I'm going to give her the full credit because she deserves it. That basically there are multiple. All the top LPL teams have very distinctive and defined playstyles that is different to one another. I'm like, wait a moment, Axis is that So boys, I'm going to just put the pin here. If Axis go to Worlds, they've already got a playbook where they know they're comfortable playing. And hey, if we just see Axis always trying to play the same way, that's going to do better than what we saw V3 fucking do at Worlds last year.
Yeah.
Just going to say that. And also, I rate Honey now on internationally. Like if we had to do top 25 best AD carries, I don't know if I'm putting him in the top 10. I don't know if I'm crazy enough to do that and put him with like top like LCK, LPL,
He's somewhere
and
between
1 and
10 and
2.
20 after some thought.
Yeah, he's there for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's good enough where you're like, well, if you make worlds, you could make a deep run with the right kind of bracket and go
As
deep. You
always.
could at least make groups. Maybe. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Sorry, I'm just taking the tangent off there because Axis looks so good. And there's nothing else more to say. Gentlemen, have you got anything else more you want to say on Axis Chris game yet? Because this was just, yeah. No. Okay. Well, we do have a quick question, though, obviously, for Axis facing off against V3 Sports coming in this weekend, gentlemen. Obviously, the three of us are going to be on the analyst desk, so we're going to be able to natter about this to our absolute heart's content.
Well,
we're taking
10
it
minutes
on.
of heart's content. Let's be real. The
Well,
analyst.
we'll get a pre-show. We get a 30
Yeah,
minute
okay.
pre-show.
I'm with you.
We got some time. Obviously, looking forward.
Let's turn my chair around again now. There we go.
What's the question that I really like for this is, and I can't remember which one of you wrote this down. You can claim ownership in a moment. Relative power level. What do we think of these two teams' relative power level, considering that we're coming off of that Juggernaut match? We know we're there. We're about to come onto it, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry. Now that we've seen RJ and DFM, where do we compare V3 and Axis? Who wants to come first, or do you guys want to take sides and debate this, or?
So, I think it's a little difficult to read in some ways because I actually think CGA put up so little of a fight, unfortunately.
Fair.
And
Very
that
true.
actually means, I don't think, I think Al said this earlier, that Axis were all that pushed. Which does make giving relative power levels a little bit tricky. I think V3, at least to my pre-playoffs expectations, were better than anticipated. So I hope that we should get a relatively close series. I do, however, think Hollow and Rhino will not have as much free reign, and I wonder whether that will cause V3 some more issues again, especially because they are still going to be playing with a sub-jungler.
Nymaera?
So I think at the beginning of playoffs, before we went into it, I said that V3 are probably not going to be in a great spot in round 1, and then if they survive that, we'll reassess that as it goes on. They came in much stronger than I thought they would do at that first round. They've survived it. They are a team which does seem to do better in the bigger games, actually, and they tend to do better in a best-of-5 scenario because their prep seems to be pretty good. They seem to be quite aware of what they're drafting, and that's something which we'll come on to with the FM. I don't think they're very good at actually right now in a best-of-5 scenario. That's going to be a problem for them. I think that now you look at Axis, who were not pushed in round 1, they just stuck to their style, and that's one that they're very effective at. It's going to be close in the lower bracket finals, but I actually wonder if I favor V3 in that now, actually, even with the Unica potentially playing as jungle. I think actually, I'm looking at that and saying that V3 are on very good form right now, and I think that Axis did not get very good practice from the first round. And I don't know if they've got the depth of styles to outlast V3 in a best-of-5 right now.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, check out our full pre-game show because we can't do it on our podcast because technical difficulties happen. So we're going to do a full 30-minute pre-game show where we're the three of us. We're going to break it down. You're basically going to get a mini LJLOU podcast as a pre-show coming in to that stellar match. I believe I'm actually going to just double check this because I think I should and I want to. So I'm just going to keep talking and stalling for time because that's what I do. We're going to have Midnight and Melvin Izzle on the casters. So we got a stack lineup, and we've got our boy Reed as well on production. So it's gonna be stacked. One, we're always aiming to kind of keep improving the broadcast, and honestly, I was really pumped about our last one that we did last week.
It was a really good broadcast. It's probably the best one we've done this year, I'd say. So go watch it. It's really good.
Definitely. That wasn't casting. Definitely helps.
I mean, so the Juggernaut match, gentlemen. The Juggernaut match.
You guys were supposed to say no. You were supposed to back me up. No, I just left there.
Mate, you put yourself out.
I did. I was hoping for the boys to rescue me, but no.
I mean,
no,
you've got your younger brother and you've got me, dude. Like, I'm a nepotist. Like, I don't know what you're expecting here. All the nepotism of me being hosty.
You wanted the boys, you got Billy Butcher instead. Good job, Sam.
Oh!
I'm surrounded by narcissists, a lot of you.
So is that Pike trying to kill Alistair, or how does that work?
Maybe. Who is Homelander in the League of Legends equivalent?
Ooh.
Ooh,
I'm gonna defer to you guys because I feel like you know this one slightly better than me.
I don't know.
it's probably like, I mean, like, it's like voice-wise Jace, but I don't think that's
Yeah.
true.
Well, no, it's only
Yeah.
voice.
Well, we don't really
Yeah.
have like the really good anti-hero who's actually kind of hide under the guise of being good.
It's
in League of Legends.
Ezreal in about 20 years. Once
Ezreal
powers
in
got
20
to his
years.
head.
Sure, cool. That works.
You belong in a museum. V3 Esports faced off against Axis this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be doing our full pre-game coverage. We'll know what the result is with you guys, and we'll be doing Epic Pen and more things. Again, send us your feedback and thoughts on the broadcast so we can get better, because guess what? We're trying to rival EU Masters, which is just on the precipice, which we all were on the broadcast of playing as well. So
we want to show that we can be a top tier broadcast working with, zero budget, which is really fun in a lot of ways.
In a way, it shows a lot. We are definitely hitting the absolute precipice of what we can really get out of not having a budget. We're gonna have to pull this band-aid off for anyone that hasn't watched the series. Detonation Focus Me facing off against Rascal Jester. DFM lost 2-3 to Rascal Jester, and well, we need to do the first thing. Well done, Rascal Jester. You guys absolutely deserve this win.
That's not sarcastic clapping. That is like legit clapping. You guys played super well.
Yes, soundboard and all. Absolutely. Well done. Well done to the players of Rascal Jester. No one on our predictions, including random.org. No one on the official stream. I haven't seen many people on Twitter outside of some hardcore Rascal Jester fanatics who are just going to always support them. And as you should. As you fucking should if you're a fan of a team and you want to support them. If your emotions say they're going to win, they're going to win. If they lose, whatever. If they win, fuck it. Well, you told us. They did it. They actually overthrew it. I don't even know where we really want to start this outside of, obviously we've got to do a call out over to our MVP from this whole series, and it was Soul. Soul had maybe the best series we've seen out of him, and I'm comparing that to obviously Spring, because obviously we've only had a few best of fives with him previously. He just put Rascal Jester on his back at some point. My god.
Well, Rascal Jester organization have not made a finals for 7 years.
2014 was it?
2014 they won the very inaugural split of LJL. Then I think the next split they lost to DFM in the finals. I actually don't know if they've even made up until the modern era. I don't know if they even made a playoffs after that point, because remember it was top 3 which went through to playoffs, and I'm not sure if they even made it through to that point. I don't think they've won a playoff series since 2014. Because they either wouldn't have been in playoffs, or 2020 Spring they lost to CGA. Some they weren't in it. Spring they lost in Juggernaut, and then lost in the semi-final too. So they have not won. I think I'm confident in saying they have not won a playoff series since 2014.
Which is pretty unreal when you put it that way.
Ridiculous. And I think the only AD carry performance I would put up on the same pedestal as what Sol pulled off in this series was Art in Spring 2020 versus CJ, who actually got our MVP for that series, even though he lost. I don't even think Utapon played badly this series.
No, I don't either.
Game 2, where he was getting picked off a bit, and then the Jin game in Game 3, not great. But I still think that Utapon was fine/good in that series. But Sol this was still a massive bot diff because of how well Sol was playing. Holy crap.
And even the Jin game, I think Utapon, aside from the solo kill which Sol get from the Hail of Blades into the Piercing Arrow blade,
that was phenomenal.
Because Utapon was basically looking for 1 minion for Gale Force. That's literally what he was doing, and he got it. He thought he could walk out, and he couldn't. Aside from that, I actually think Utapon played the Jin quite well. I just don't think it was a very good comp for Jin.
No.
Which is a bit of a different one, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, because I actually think games 3 and 4 was just Detonation should focus me going, here, have a draft throw from us. The Rascal Jester going, well, that was very kind of you. Have a draft throw from us.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, let's actually talk about that, because that was one of the first things I remember when we came out, and the three of us were just kind of chatting in the green room afterwards. And one of the first things that I came out with, and I was just kind of frustrated at the time was the inability for DFM to actually adapt their draft. They would routinely do the same thing over and over and over again. And DFM banned Ziggs 100% of the time throughout this series, regardless of the side. They played 4 of the 5 games on blue side, by the way, even when they switched over. They had Ezreal banned 80% of the time. Yeah, Soul's Ezreal's scary. Udapons is also really good, so that's a question. Callista, Udapon got to play her once, didn't look great. But on the opposite side, Soul's one looked terrifying, so that's another one. 60%, so she had 100% present throughout that series. And then RJ banned, guess what? Irelia 100% of the time, LeBlanc 100% of the time, Nidalee 100% of the time. And then on the opposite side, they also, on the second rotation, they would also ban Echo 60% and Silas 60%. Basically, they targeted Arya and steals one champion. I guess Irelia is technically a flex pick between Ebby and Arya, but I feel like it's more of a mid laner at this point in time. And it's like, Jesus Christ, when you just start looking at this, like, DFM, like Rascal Jester just had like DFM's book, and we're like, okay, you guys are gonna keep playing the same drafts over and over. The first 3 games, like DFM just go, we're always gonna have to first pick Trundle. They B1'd Trundle 4 out of the 5 games.
I don't think the Trundle's the problem. I don't think the Trundle.
No, but the lack of adaptation is the problem.
So okay, go now.
So I don't think the Trundle in itself is the problem. I think there are some very important things that you're talking about in terms of the bans and stuff, Lexi, because first 3 games, there were 4 bans leveled against Arya, and a takeaway of the Syndra as well. So technically 5 denied champions in the first 3 games, because Rascal Jesters were heavily prioritizing the Syndra, which was played by Recap 1, 2, 3... 3 out of the 5 games, and then basically after game 3, DFM decided, all right, we're going to start leaning on Arya to get some more priority at this point, because normally they've given him counter pick, but if you're playing into a Syndra's current power level right now is enough that you cannot really easily counter pick, you know, with a plethora of champions. So Arya,
she's so good she can play bot now. Like,
yeah, well,
that's
exactly.
Kind of the power.
Basically, I mean, obviously Syndra was always a bit of a flex anyway, because you have wave control. Well, you have wave control now because you have your Q not costing 60 mana at level 1, which is incredibly exorbitant when you're casting as much as you used to do on Syndra. It's gone back down to 40, so that's like a good third of the mana cost shaved off of it, which means that you don't need to go towards tier anymore. You don't need to go towards Seraphs. You can do, of course, if you want to, but you can go just towards like a full AP nuke build. You have good matchups versus a load of different stuff, and a lot of the time you can be the sole AP threat on your team. Actually, in game 1, one of my problems was, hang on, you've picked 2 AP solo lanes, and then DFM kind of ran off the game because Syndra couldn't really do much, and that was kind of Rascal Jester kind of like, you know, working out their own kinks in what they're attempting to achieve. But the later it got on, it felt like DFM were trying to prioritize getting Arya into the game, but they were doing it in such janky ways, because there was the one point where they picked the Akali when it's like, yes, we've got an assassin into the Syndra. It doesn't work into the enemy team comp, though. And the more the games went on, I had this picture building of DFM can understand what they want to pick through a very narrow lens of what they want to do in lane or one person's perspective without seeing the larger picture. And it worries me that they don't have awareness in the draft, it seems right now, to stop themselves falling into quite obvious draft deficits in these big games.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of pitfalls.
I'll say I'm not sure I necessarily entirely agree with they didn't adapt in the series, because I don't think that's actually true.
I don't think they adapt. So I
did
they adapt well is the problem.
Yeah, and that's because so that's kind of so like you look at the first comp and they've gone for the Nara and the Rise, and they've got Varus, Leona, Trundle, which is a solid 3 core where you can kind of go 1-3-1 or 1-4 depending on who you want to send where. And you kind of, so that's one style play, and then you've got the next one, which is you've got the Lee Sin in the jungle, you've still got that Varus, Leona, you've still got the Nart, which has stayed the same, but you've pivoted in the Zoe, so you've got the kind of the poke comp with the front line, which, you know, they nearly won with and then kind of threw in the late game because, you know, Rel Callista jumping on an immobile Varus every time, hint, hint. And then the one time where I go, that draft was really bad.
I mean, also take heal over cleanse.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, you can't cleanse the knockups. It's a bit pointless.
I mean, Renekton and stun. Sorry.
Yeah, you only got Renekton stun and you got the Syndra stun.
Rel stun and stuff.
But a lot of Rel CC is knockups aside from the attract repel. Everything else is a knockup. I don't think you can cleanse Magnet Storm. as well.
Not to my knowledge, actually. So yeah,
so,
you're
so,
correct.
so, so, so actually, a lot of that is pretty uncleansable. So so in some ways, I see the argument for going heal and just saying, well, if I'm going to get this, might.
But you're probably dead anyway, right?
Well,
So.
exactly. So it's like, well, I might as well try and survive burst and maybe run like. I wonder whether Merc Treads might have been a game that. Anyway, that's another point entirely. But then the one where I go, okay, this didn't work was the Akali game for Aria.
Game 3.
Yeah, this was game 4. No, sorry, no, it was game 3.
Game
Absolutely
3.
right. I apologize. Wasn't scroll down far enough. Where the rest of the comp, like, okay, so again, this is kind of where I do agree a little bit more with that. Where like this was the one where I go, okay, that was a bit of a weird lens they went through. Where okay, so you've got Akali and two immobile backline carries. That's great news. But there's no one really there to follow up. And you've kind of got this Jhin Leona, and the Jhin doesn't really fit in here. You got the Gnar that's sort of okay, and the Trundle that's sort of okay, but nothing else that backs up, and nothing else that will tank and exhaust for you. So Secret just runs exhaust and goes, okay, every time Akali comes on an exhaust run, the rest of the team comp is useless.
Well, and also,
that was the more problem.
Like, this would be different if it was a LeBlanc there, because Akali has to dive being a melee champion into an Alistar, and Alistar has no incentive to be the person leaving his group to go engage, because Syndra can just land a stun. Varus can go land an ultimate, and when you've got zero wave clear outside of the Jhin who can do bits and pieces, that's not good enough. So that was the big game for me where I'm like, what the hell are you doing, DFM? I thought there was a good the one good adaptation I do think that DFM did make, because again, it was a close series, was effectively DFM realized that, okay, you are going to be picking the Alistar, picks 3, 4, 5 at that point. What happens if we lock in the Sylas early? Because if we lock in Sylas, you do not want to play Alistar, because having an invincible Sylas, getting like an extra 2 Ws off in a fight because he's taking like 70% less damage, is not something you can play around at that point. So they did that in game 4, and they did that in game 5 too. Game 4, it worked out incredibly well, and Ari just kind of like 1v9'd. But game 5, there was a different set of circumstances yet again. I think that was like, that's the one piece of credit I'll give for DFM's drafting. Obviously wasn't enough for the whole series, and we expected this to be an absolute stomp, and it absolutely wasn't.
So yeah, but before I hand over, basically, like, this is where I basically look. I do think DFM did adapt a fair amount through draft, at least for things like, look, we had the Sylas, the Akali, the Zoe. There was a fair amount of shifts in terms of the team comps, but there were a few things that stayed quite similar, and I also think there were some issues in terms of outside of the game 2, which I think was just bad draft. The others was a fair amount of adaptability in my mind in terms of what the team comps wanted to be doing. I just think there was not a lot of adaptability in terms of playstyle, sort of 10 to 15 minutes mark, which I might talk about a bit later. So I'm not sure I entirely agree with you guys on that.
I still will stick by my opinion. The fact that Ebby played 3 games of Gnar and then only 2 games of Tahm Kench, still played 4 games of the same champion except for 1 game of Lee Sin. Arya played 2 games of Sylas. 1 game of Akali in a spot that we've all unanimously agreed it was just bad. I loved the Rise with the first comp. I actually hate the Zoe. I actually really hate the Zoe. Really, really hate it. Like, there are multiple champions who are more than happy for Zoe to ever jump forward. They can collapse and kill her. Like, I'm just not a fan. I also don't quite know why we're going for 2 like poke kind of champions with the Varus and the Zoe, but then we're playing Lee Sin, Leona, Gnar. Like, why have we got such a big frontline when we want to be a poke comp, which means we actually want to be kind of doing something a little bit different.
You do need frontline for the poke comp.
But
you do need CC. Yeah, I think that's fine.
I'm not disagreeing, but I don't think you need 3 champions who are meant to be a kind of a frontline, find a pick, kind of do something, and then you play poke. Like, that's just counterintuitive. You're not committing one way or the other. They're trying to have their cake and eat it because they are the best team, or coming into the series were the best team. I'm getting a lot of arrogance through this draft from DFM continuously throughout it. And
I also don't want to go.
Uniform played so many games of Varus, and he just didn't look like he looked good, but it wasn't impenetrable. And this is a player that we were expecting more of. The Ashe in that final game, he did like 10 auto attacks. Melvin Izzle did the breakdown on it. He did like 10 or 11 auto attacks. I'm imagining if he was on a different AD carry, he might have actually got that kill.
That was on the Ashe, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like it was I don't know.
No,
I'm not sold. I really don't like it.
So I'm gonna go off a couple of 2 things here. I don't necessarily. So for me, I don't attribute this to arrogance. I do this to ignorance, actually, in some ways. Because I agree that it is a mistake. I think that maybe it's not arrogance.
I don't think you give the Yang Gang not enough credit. I think they just, we can do whatever we want.
Because things are like,
I want to go results based analysis on this as well. That would be a bit rough on that.
So I think that the Zoe Varus duo has been like obviously well studied. I think it is a very good poke combo. Like you land a bubble and someone just immediately dies. I think the problem is, and it's something which actually Sam kind of talked about it at some time between the games. Effectively, DFM had a problem where they didn't accelerate the game early enough to actually get this poke combo into early Soul, early Barons, close out the game and stuff like that, and eventually got to the point where the Callista has so many defensive stats and the ability to heal up and then collapse onto the enemy backline with just slamming the ultimate and getting the rel on top of someone like Utapon. That DFM could not close out the game in time. And that, to me, speaks to more problems about what were they doing in the early game. Because I think that, again, the Zoe Varus is absolutely fine at 2-3 items. I think when you get to 4-5 in late game, that's where it becomes super problematic against a heavy engage comp. The Gnar is okay. Lee Sin gives you early pressure, but they didn't like utilize that.
They didn't do much yet.
Yeah. And again, like I mean, Leona gives the ability to pin someone down in place. So like I think we can go over each of these drafts and like have, a decent amount of criticism for a couple of them. I think this game 2-1 was mainly DFM not playing it out correctly for me. I think that the draft itself is not awful in isolation. It's very playable. They didn't play out the early game well enough, and they certainly didn't close it in the mid game, which is of course where things started falling apart. And that for me, that's Sol and Secret just wrangling the game away with their agency to just crush down the mid jungle, mid AD carry.
So to clarify on this one, like when they actually started snowballing, it was about 30 minutes in, and they kind of hit up. So they get about 1.5k ahead, about 31 minutes, and then they jump to nearly 8k ahead of 38. That's when they get Baron, they get a big time fight, they get themselves a soul point, all looks good. And that needed to be 5 minutes before that, 10 minutes before that. I think they were also a bit unlucky that it was Cloud Soul with your 2 DPS of your Varus and a Zoe. I mean, it's not awful on Varus for running away, but if that had been a Mounted Soul to stop people jumping on your 2 carries and therefore Utapon survives, or if that had been Infernal Soul, so you got double poke, and then suddenly Soul can't heal up through everything, you might have been in a different space. But that was a bit unfortunate, I think. And this is kind of like maybe where, for all I see, like there was different like ways that, like in terms of when I was talking about the adaptability, I was saying like look, there's different ways DFM want to play with these comps, even if some of the champions are the same. I kind of do agree with you though, Lexi, that for all that Utapon was playing fine on the Varus, I wonder whether it would have been nice to see like something that wasn't like the Varus Leona lane that was fine, but just a different look, just to refresh things, especially things are a little bit rough. Like, cause I don't think a lot of these comps are actually that bad, or certainly unplayable, aside from Draft 3, which I think was objectively quite frustrating for them to play. All the other ones I go, yeah, you could win with this. But if things are getting close, just pull out another card, guys. Like, I know you can do this.
And I think that's honestly the end of that part of this whole part, because it's like, we know all of these players have champion fucking oceans. We know that they can pull out and play a bunch of stuff. Why are we forcing ourselves to doing this? And we had this conversation, I can't remember if it was on the broadcast or not, about obviously they can play so much more, and obviously looking towards Worlds is the reason that they don't want to show stuff, is potentially because Worlds is going to have its own patch and everything else. So I don't know. It was very peculiar. I mean, I think you guys summed it up perfectly. Like game number 2, they should have been winning. They started snowballing at 30 minutes. I mean, honestly, DFM had a great at 15-minute stats. They were ahead they were always ahead in gold at 15 minutes. They were always up in kills almost always. They always, if they had traded a dragon at 15, like given Rascal Jester first dragon, they always got Rift Herald instead. They were great at playing around this early game. The issue which we've already explained is the way in which they transition these small leads in individual lanes into actually then going from somewhere else. The only one they didn't have it was that game 5, which went pretty well from a Rascal Jester's perspective.
Oh, they had
really
the best
well.
level 1 of all time. That level 1 was so good.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, that game 5, because obviously game 4 was a fairly big switcher for DFM. You bring in the Tom Kent, which was Ruington R2's champion, but you've still got this Trundle into the Jin Zhao. Jin Zhao hates going into Trundle. It's awful for him. He can't win those duels. You've still got the Silas into things like the Rise or the Zoe. You get on top of them, you can kind of murder them. All of that's looking really good. And then, shit, we've given 2 kills over early. Hachimecha's going to get snowballing super quickly. Ebby he has got burned his flash level 1 and died and has to teleport into lane, so he can't pressure lane, and therefore Kinatu gets to shove in, so he can't play through mid, because that's all Steel's done all series is play through mid to mixed success, actually. Yeah, and that game just falls apart super fast.
Their goal differences were just, it's kind of the unwieldy thing where it's like, I just don't get it. Like, this was DFM, like, you can't get leads in 4 out of 5 games and be losing them, because we've just seen 2 teams in the previous 2 rounds get early game leads, convert that into mid-game wins, convert that into, oh, that's a Nexus explosion 3 times in a row, and we're just like, I'm like,
Yeah.
I know Crest Gaming Act and Hawks like are not as good as Rascal Jester and DFM, but then I also don't think Axis and V3 were that much better, except for CGA. But then I don't think Hawks are that much worse than V3, and I'm just kind of like, what is going on? Has DFM just lost their play style? Like what went boom outside of Rascal Jester reading them like a book?
And when, I mean, I think DFM, when they played with Rise, looked very different to playing without it too. You know, they seem to understand how to play around Rise. It wasn't actually contested for most of it. Maybe they didn't want to play Rise into... I mean, I was about to say, maybe they don't want to play it into, like, higher range comps, but it's still playing against, you know, Lee Sin jungle and stuff like that, and he played it into the Syndra.
Yeah, and he played it into Syndra in game 1, yeah.
So I wonder if DFM were... I don't know. I can't imagine them just sandbagging that series. I mean, Inara does have a lot of faith in his Silas, and Silas was not the problem in Game 5. And their last 2 team fights were actually stunningly close to coming out ahead.
I'll put a little bit of a potential counter take here. DFM stomped games 1 and 4. Absolutely stomped them. They had a trash draft in Game 3 and got right.
27 minutes, both games. Yeah, I'd agree.
Game 3, they had the trash draft, which we've all been over, and they lost that one decisively, which is fair. So, okay, it's 2-1 at that point. And then there's the Game 2, which I think is perhaps the most indicative one. Because Game 5 is the level 1 goes wrong, and then DFM do a DFM come G2 of old thing, where they just continue to look for plays and get punished every time they do an anti-snowball. Which is like how they like, it's the old MLXG meme, which is, you know, like, if you're behind, you try and just look for an engage to get back into the game. If you're ahead, you look for a play to get back into the game. And that kind of Game 5 devolves from there. So put that one a little bit to the side. Well played from Jess for the level 1. So Game 2, in that way, in my mind, becomes the more indicative one of what happens if Jessers can hold DFM accountable in the early game. And they manage to push it to late. And you get to 46 plus minutes, and it is the hyper late game where one mistake loses you the game, and Udapon gets caught twice and they lose the game. So I don't even necessarily think DFM played purely badly, because they had 2 games that were really good, and then one which was kind of a draft loss. And then there's this weird one.
So I want to just poise it here to you, Initialize. If Syros is in that game number 2, DFM 100% do a TP play and end that game before Rascal Jesters can do anything. 100% vintage DFM will make that call and just pull the trigger, and it would have been like probably a 3-1 to DFM.
Well,
I completely see where you're going with this.
Syros doesn't play Zoe, thus you wouldn't have the
But if that had been a Heimerdinger there...
Well, then you don't have the super poke combo. So
no. Yeah, but I'm just meaning like it's that whole idea of like DFM when Syros was there, they make these kind of crazy like backdoor plays. Let's just end this game.
We could see that with the Rise. We could see that with DFM playing with Rise.
Where was that game number 2 though? Yeah, who was making? Why were those calls not being made for DFM?
I mean,
they were 8K ahead at 38 minutes.
I'll also say that, you know, there is an element here of you look how Steel was playing the series, and it was it was very heavily through mid. And I actually think Recap did, like, for all that he had a relatively, you know, he did okay, right? He had a good series, but like he would like Steel was around mid a lot. Like, I think he was like highest percentage of all junglers around mid by a long way. But we saw that on stream as well, if you remember. It was like 30-odd%. And actually didn't get that much for his time there, actually. Whereas then Secret and Hachimecha, like, particularly in say Game 2, where they were like actually scuffling back and forth, getting some decent skirmishes themselves, and particularly Game 5, they matched DFM skirmishing in the kind of that 10 to 15 minute mark, which so few teams do. And I do think that for once, I think Recap had a phenomenal game, just staving off a lot of attempted plays mid.
I think we'll see him for another year or two for
I
sure in
think
the
he might,
LJL.
genuinely. So I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Recap
Yeah.
for doing a really good job of
Yeah,
surviving a
been
lot of
very
pressure.
solid. Been very solid.
And
Like,
it gave Sol free space to ruin bot lane.
Yeah,
Great for him.
Recap is not going to be your star carry, but he will in a way that Ace didn't for V3 in some way. Like, always
I
be
was thinking the
solid,
same.
actually. He's not the playmaker, but, like, it's hard to rattle him.
Oh man, I'm so sad that I won't get Ace versus Recap in a best of 5. I'm very sad about that. The nullifying mid laners who play through other people. Unless V3 pull the run and then our whole script gets completely fucked, lads. Like, what are we gonna talk about when we go on other shows?
Well, should we
V3?
Yeah. Well, should we have a chat about what the world's potential of each of these teams is now? Is DFM likely to get upset by a lower bracket team? I don't think it's likely, but I think it's not it's no longer completely out of the question.
No.
Just do some due diligence. Do we think DFM could realistically get upset? Is there a realistic chance? Because I think actually it would not be like a miracle for them to lose now.
I'm going to use Sam's analogy for me. I'm going to use Sam's analogy because of how he did the DFM versus Rascal Jester series. Realistically, it should have been a 3-1 for DFM if they win that game number 2. They still lose game number 3. It still goes down the same way. I'm not going to change history here. Game number 4, though, they stomp. I think DFM are probably going to 3-0 the next person that they face against.
Okay.
I will also put in here, for all that I'm saying, look, DFM threw some stuff here that maybe they should have won that series, you know.
They should have. They should have.
But the thing is, they didn't. That's because Rascal Jests are also really good. And you can't give them those openings because people like Sol will shoot 30 arrows through it and Rel will be on top of your face in about 30 seconds. Flat.
Okay, do you think Honey would do the same thing if Axis
And
made
that's just it. Like, the thing is, I think Honey could potentially do it, but I also don't think the rest of Axis, aside from maybe Hoglet, are at Rascal Jester's
Nemo?
that kind of stability level. And that's potentially what worries me. And I also think that, you know, you can have a different game plan versus Axis, which just says, okay, we just make sure Honey gets as little resources as possible. And I think Axis can kind of crumble from that.
Potentially.
I just don't see it. Why do you see a world where it comes through, Nymaera?
I see. Okay, because what we could see from DFM is they look deeply uncomfortable, like in games basically mid game onwards from game 2 or like into the late game, and then game 3. Like they looked uncomfortable. And obviously in game 5 that looked exactly the same to you when the script just got torn up at the level 1. What happens if you know a Honey and Nemo get an early 2v2, which is realistic at this point in time? What happens if they get that? Does that give an instability to DFM? And, you know, I think Megamin has been pretty fine on a number of champions. If you give him an Iron Spike,
there's no way
champion,
he gets LeBlanc though.
No, there isn't. No, because you're banning that away. But if you give, you know, you can first pick something like you can just pick Syndra again, right? You just pick Syndra because
he also had a great. I mean, obviously this was versus Kaito, but obviously he had a great Orianna game.
Yeah, no, I think that Megaman's actually been alright, but like you give him if you give him an Iron Spike Whip champion, he doesn't need to care about wave control, and that's a big thing for this split. Like something, you know, and that's obviously on the
my boy.
So that's obviously on the side of Axis. I'm looking at them saying that it is no longer like, because I mean I thought it would be a miracle for Rascal just to take 2 games off of DFM. Obviously they took 3 of them. And I don't think Rascal Jester are completely out of sight of the lower bracket teams. I think that is 10 to 15% chance that DFM lose now. I
think that's reasonable.
10 to 15, which is like normal. And whereas before I would have said like a 3 to 5% chance in a best of 5. No, seriously, like it would be that lower chance because of the performances that they showed in the tiebreaker match, particularly at the end of the split. I'm like, yeah, this team is just way above everything that we've seen in the LJL for its entire history. You know, that tiebreaker game is maybe like the most dominant best of 1 we have seen in the LJL, given the teams that were involved. So it's just worth checking in on that.
Yeah, and then, I mean, like the thing. I mean, okay. So Theorycraft with me for a second, Al. Because I think you like. Okay, so I guess if I'm going to put this into like more specific, like how does one get under DFM's skin? Because before we were saying, how do you get under their skin? It seems really hard. I think Rascal Jester did at least show that, which is partly why we're having this conversation, which is if you can disrupt the bit early, like with Sol and Secret kind of holding Udapon and Gang a little bit accountable. If you can start skirmishing with them and get some and win a lot of those early skirmishes, you'll notice like DFM, particularly Gang, actually, has a habit of continuing to look for players to try and turn around that kind of mid game, and they can really get anti-snowballed on. And if you do that versus someone like Axis, you give kills over to someone like Hoglet or Honey, you know, I think there is a world where they could do that.
We're talking about Axis. I think the only team in the LJL which has made a playstyle out of aggressive early 15 minutes is V3. So I think that if you have V3 coming up against DFM, that is a significant chance of early pressure coming in and rattling DFM. So I need to see that DFM have powerful blind picks that they can give to their star players, that it doesn't matter what the draft goes like after that point, that they can start winning a lot of these drafts. And like I need to see them start doing more with a Syndra. Like, they need to start doing more. We know the Initia1ise plays it too. But the fact that they didn't get a single game of Syndra this series is problematic to me.
It could be one Syndra instead of a Trundle.
I mean, playing Syndra into Trundle can be a problem. I
understand we've said that Trundle isn't the thing, but the fact is,
in the context of the mid lane matchup, what the hell were you doing there? So anyway, lots of different questions. I think it's just worth checking in on that, because whereas before we were like 99% certain that DFM were going to be our Worlds reps, now we're suddenly thinking actually maybe a lower bracket team could upset them in a semi-final situation. And then obviously if they do make it through even to that point, they have to face up against Rascal Jester again. Just being completely honest, I still think DFM are favored to win this split. It just changes a lot of my prospects for them going after that point.
Yeah.
Again, I also don't want to get super heavy on one series going, oh, it's all doomed. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm still favoring DFM for the split, but
I don't want to say, oh, it's doomed once if they win the split and move on. I don't want to say like, oh no, they're forever doomed, and like all the positive things we had about them are now gone because of one series. Like, that would be foolish as well.
No, but it would be also foolish to not at least criticize a team that should have 3-0'd.
Absolutely. And again, I think we've been pretty good on that one too. But it's also one of the ones where like I will be interested to see what adaptations do come through, because the thing is like the other one I wanted to call is like, I know DFM we've seen them do it, can wait for like go for a team that holds back a little bit, and then or rather a team comp that holds back for a little bit and waits to scale. Like, we've seen them do it when they picked the Ezreal before and it's gone, okay, we're just not gonna play until 20 minutes and then we've got items and then we'll beat you. Whereas kind of in the Jester series, like, no, oh shit, we've missed a player, let's go for another one. And like that was their modus operandi, that they refused to take a different pacing, if that makes sense, in how they wanted to play the game. And that was interesting to see as well. Like, clearly their read versus the Jesters, or clearly their read in that series was, we have to go for these skirmishes, and that really bit them in the butt in a couple of games. Yeah, so I'm curious to see whether we might see. I'd like to see another angle on that one potentially as well.
We also, all three of us are well aware, we've seen this script already from the LJL, from DFM specifically, way back in spring 2020. Like, we're actually painfully aware of how this all goes. Our DFM play a best of 5 versus a second seed. They lose that best of 5. It goes, oh my god, DFM are over. V3 face them in round 3. DFM slap them with a mind games, and then they come into finals and they slap the second seed again. It just goes, oh yeah, DFM. Yeah, they are just the best. They are just the best in this region. Honestly, that's how I expect this all to go. I'm expecting a cracking best of 5 versus Axis and V3, and then it's just going to be DFM dominance. Like, I'm honestly, that's what I'm expecting. We're going to get the best 5-game series, hopefully from V3 Axis, and then afterwards I want DFM supremacy. Yeah. If it doesn't go that way, whoever gets to go over DFM, well done.
They deserve it.
You
absolutely
fucking deserve it. I'm not sure how you're going to do internationally, but you get the title.
Yeah.
That's good for you. Gentlemen, if DFM can't go, right? If we say there's a world where DFM can't go, which one of these 3 teams that are currently still in the running for it would you want going over? Would we want to pull like a CGA kind of? Do you think there's a CGA-esque team? Personally, for me, Axis is the team I would like to go, because they already have a distinct play style. And even if you try and hyper ban out Honey, they probably can just figure
solo
something
lanes. We're gonna have the V3 problem. We're gonna have the V3 problem where they're just gonna get outclassed in solo lanes. You can't.
I'm just saying who I'd like. It's an opinion thing. It doesn't matter realistically.
And also, they have a lot of rookies going to Worlds. That shafted V3 last year.
But they ain't V3.
I think potentially
maybe you do.
I can see V3 being okay. Or Jesters. Honestly, I think Rascal Jesters have got the veterancy on there. Everybody but Kinatu is a veteran on that.
So at least V3 did have that Worlds experience last year, and I'm wondering if Reiner will have learned from that.
Yeah. Oh, we're interesting because you go for V2. I think I'd go Jester. If Lex is going Axis, we've all got three different takes on that one.
I think I'd go V3 because they have an aggressive early game. They are slightly more variable in their picks and bans compared to some like Rascal Jesters who are quite typecast in what they do. And I do think that their coaching staff and their players on the Rift will have had a bit more experience with a world setting, and particularly with Ace actually being pretty decent this year, and some powerful subs they can bring with them. I don't know who they'd choose. There's a
they can bring two with them, right?
I think it's only one. I think you can bring one, and one's an emergency in case of illness and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I think they'd probably bring Jungle. I would say for mid, actually.
Well, considering that potentially, if V3 make it, can Mugen still play Worlds if they qualified with a sub?
That's true. I mean, they can because he's played over half the games with the.
Yeah, but
so
I think you go
Unica and
Mugen.
Want to have Mugen
yes,
go?
I think so.
I think they probably do. Okay, well, you bring either mid or jungle either way. But yeah, no, I think that V3 would be like, look, I wouldn't be happy with any of them in terms of, like, neither of them is making groups. None of them's, I don't think any of the teams which aren't DFM are making play-ins. Making out of play-ins. You need peak DFM for that.
Yeah, so that's the question now for Worlds. As obviously that we can spitball this for 2 minutes. But do we think DFM will still look good at Worlds on the assumption they go? Now, obviously, I guess their fashion in which they lift the LJL Cup will affect our opinions here. And obviously, you can say the word that you're hopeful that DFM will get in. I'm still expecting them to still have a really good run. My concern only comes with how some of the third teams in major regions are currently looking, third and fourth seeds, and I'm like, ooh, DFM looked really good, but now am I like, oh, have I actually been a bit too much big fish, small pond, and now I'm looking at these other third and fourth seeds going, I think beating them might be harder than I first thought. Where are you guys sitting?
I mean, yes, but the thing is, like, I agree with you, but it was never. I think the thing is, it's not like we're sending an FPX or a Damwon Kia from last year. If you want to go, like, they go, yeah, everyone's like, yeah. These guys who are just gonna, if you put them against any given team,
yeah, but I'm not saying they're number one seed. I'm saying third or fourth seed from this region.
And I'm
still
saying,
terrified
yes,
for us.
Yeah, exactly.
Fourth seed LPL is
it's always going to be good. And again, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what I'm saying is, actually, what we are sending a team that I think is probably, but at least if it was to be someone like DFM or a team that rises to a level to beat an on-form DFM and takes their spot anyway,
but
should be able to at least compete with these third and fourth place teams, and they did so at MSI relatively convincingly, actually. So I think it would be
but Sam,
would it be a done deal? No, but I think it's still doable.
If they rise to face an on-form DFM. This DFM and the Juggernaut match, I don't think that's an
part of my
on-form
question,
thing. So I think that actually, if DFM don't make
it, call it an entirely off form either. Though that's all I'm saying. I don't think they were absolute trash.
I would say that.
I mean, they weren't the best, but I don't think they were absolute trash
was
either.
Deplorable. Losing their streak going into this, PSG Town 3-0'd their first
one. Oh yeah.
DFM losing this, not good. Not impressed.
So I mean, it was the opinion of people within the LJL scene that if DFM lost a single match in the playoffs, it would be a disgrace to them.
Like, I think it is.
And it would be a disappointment. It would be unacceptable, was the words of one person as well, actually. You know, people I've talked to. And I agree with that. I think that while it's fantastic for the narratives of the scene for DFM to not cleanly sweep through playoffs and stuff.
The other three orgs are loving this.
Like, there is no way that Juggernaut match DFM is on form DFM, which is why I think that if we do send another team based off of that level of performance, they're not going to be able to, for me, they are not going to compete with the fourth seed LPL, third seed EU, or something like that.
You ain't competing with Fanatical Rogue here.
Yeah,
not at this
two
point.
Questions at this point then. I think the 2 points. One, I would suggest that I think if any team beats DFM, we would have the same conversation whether they were on form or not, actually, because DFM had lost and therefore they clearly couldn't have been on form. And that becomes a bit of a vicious cycle,
I
potentially.
think that's results-based analysis there.
Well, but that's my point is I wonder whether we do end up in that position if we're not careful.
Losing 3 games becomes less out of a starts to become a trend.
Sure. So my point being, actually,
one isn't enough.
If I'm saying if a team
I
beats
think you're right,
on-form
Sam.
DFM,
3 is not a trend. 3 starts to become a trend.
Yeah. So my point being is like, if you do beat on-form DFM in a best of 5, like we would still potentially say, oh well, DFM. I don't want to undercut teams by saying, oh well, DFM clearly weren't playing well. I'll also for all that I agree, they definitely weren't on form. I don't think they were like absolutely trash. But I don't think they were absolutely trash either.
But it should have been 3 27-minute games.
Oh yeah, absolutely, it should have been.
We only got 2 of them, and then an absolute mess.
Well, and
after game 1, you thought, Sam, you predicted it would be a 3-0 under 30 minutes for game 2 and 3.
I did, and I stand by that. But what I am saying is just because they didn't play to at 100%, they were probably at 70%. I always think Rascal Jesters really turned up.
Wouldn't you argue that 70% is not good enough when this is probably one of the most important matches of the whole year?
Completely agree, but I also don't want to say, Jester just beat a team that wasn't playing well. That's not entirely fair either.
Rascal Jesters played the best that we have seen them play in the LJL with this iteration. I'm comfortable in saying that.
Agreed.
However,
say that.
The fact that only barely overcame a DFM, which I thought was seriously struggling in draft and out of it, is rough. It's rough.
And the fact that they still had 2 27-minute games fuck them over. RJ lost 2 27-minute games.
Yeah.
That is not good. That is really not good for them. When you flip it over, DFM had 2 really good games, right? You go, yeah, absolutely.
That adds something to what Sam's saying in terms of were DFM truly off form or not really. I mean, I think you can argue.
I also think it's binary, right? That's my point. As I don't want to say binary on form, off form. I think they were sort of frustrating in the middle.
In fact, literally what I was just about to say.
There you go then.
Because I was about to say, you can argue about the percentages. I would say it's a little less than 70%, but it's not too far off. Somewhere between 60 and 70%. Would I say they were 30%? Absolutely not. But yeah, I think that there were some individual misplays. I think that there was a huge strategic error coming into that series from them too. Either way, I think that DFM hope if they do regain form, I don't think we've seen a level of play from the LJL teams that would be competing with them to knock them out of world's contention. I would say that right now. So you can pin that as a clip if you want, if everything goes tits up from that point. But that's my feeling right now.
Right. I actually think we got a really good little analysis out of that. We had to go around a few corners to get there, but I think we all got onto a similar page at the end of it. Well done, gentlemen. Well done. Well, I think we have to, obviously, we always take the scenic route here, mate. If we get too close to the scenic route, we'll be back to 3-hour podcasts again. We can't be doing that again. Oh, well, we
back
could.
In the day.
I mean,
please no, I can't. Not anymore.
I love them. They were some of my favorite podcast recordings because we literally chatted bare shit.
So there is actually some stuff in the works potentially for a collaborative minor region podcast to get people ready for it. I don't know if I'm actually going to be available for it, so one of you two might have to pick up the reins for that one.
Oh boy! But
that could be potentially huge, monolithic level of podcast material. So keep your eyes out for that.
We'll do. Have we lost Lexi? Oh, there you go. He's back.
Oh, okay. That's really weird.
I just left Discord. It's wow, I see how it is. The disagreement. You guys didn't like the 3-hour podcast. I'm leaving.
I turned around and agreed with whatever Alex was talking about just then. I'm like, wait, I've gone, hello? I'm sorry. Anyway, continue, Alex. Continue, please.
No, I was just saying that there is just keep your eyes open for that kind of content because that could reach monolithic levels of content.
That's right.
Yeah.
My response to that was, me and Sam, I'm sure we could do that if you twisted our arms.
Crazy.
Oh, whoa. Well, Quincy asked us for last time's episode podcast, but we didn't actually answer it because podcast. So Quincy asked us with postseason happening, league, world, wide world, across worlds, who would you say current best on outside of the LJL? Who is DFM's best matchup in play-ins, assuming DFM make it to worlds? I'm trying to remember who we said, and if we would still go there.
I think if you get someone like C9 in play-ins, unironically, that could be pretty okay, given the...
That'd be a POG rematch.
Yeah,
I think that... I mean, C9 are inconsistent enough.
I think every team, which is likely going to be around the playoffs bracket, is actually quite aggressive early on, and we've already kind of talked about maybe that can upset DFM. C9 are a team that cut corners to do that, though, and I feel like DFM could punish that like they did at MSI, so I feel like that could work. Minor regions, we cannot afford to be afraid of.
No,
so
we're beating all of them,
Any of the
obviously.
minor regions. I would imagine that VCS are not going to be there at that point, so I don't know whether that leaves us with the same format as next year.
So-
as last year,
this
rather.
was something I wanted to bring up earlier, but I completely forgot about it.
I reckon that VCS don't make it to Worlds at this point, given the short notice it loses.
With the VCS, I mean, we're now in Europe, boys. You know what also is in Europe happening around that same time? Fucking EU Masters! Fucking CDAR boys writing! Come on, ERLs, let's fucking go!
That would be that'd be setting quite a dangerous precedent for
I'm well
things.
aware.
So I don't know if they can actually afford to do that, but it would be very interesting if they did. But yeah, I think that I think minor regions are not something you take into consideration for. Then you're thinking of NA 3rd seed. I reckon if it's C9, actually 100 Thieves could be very achievable if they do drop down.
I think we'd beat 100T.
Yeah, because I think that if it's DFM there, I think that we have the laning strength to deal with that. And 100 Thieves, they don't take like hugely aggressive kill skirmishes. They'll zone you off of towers and stuff. But I feel like DFM play that game relatively well.
Yeah.
So I feel like we'd be better off against if it's a C9 or 100 Thieves. I think that's basically NA 3rd seed is one that if it's TL can't be 3rd now. They have to be first. Or
TSL
second,
can't, no.
Which I think is good because I think TL actually looking very strong right now. I think TL gives a real shock.
Tactical core JJ could be really scary.
LPL 4th seed is rough.
Yeah, I mean,
we hope for World Elite, but wait, she can't even be World Elite now. Oh, I don't even know who. Oh no, because remember they do points and everything else, so I'm not even gonna try and attempt to predict who's going to be 4th for them and 4th for LCK.
Is it even possible right now?
Because I quickly tried to figure the LCK stuff out, and it just doesn't make sense.
Let's have a look. Let me have a look.
Until the end of the season.
So it could be LNG. I think.
Rare Atom.
No, because remember the seeding doesn't work automatically.
Yeah, Rare Atom are automatically seeded into it. Everyone else is kind of all over the place in flux.
Oh, okay.
So there is a world where it could be LNG. Doable, assuming the likes of Tarzan doesn't get absolutely
It could be LNG, EDG, WE. Because of championship pointy stuff.
Yeah.
Elk versus Unicorn would be great for him. Breathe versus Ebby would be fun as well. I'm very happy to see all of those.
I don't think LNG is a good matchup. I think that Tarzan is just too ridiculous right now.
But he's also, if he doesn't get going, he really falls apart.
All right, gentlemen, I'm gonna just have to take us off this topic because we could start going in circles.
I think at that
start
point,
going down a deep rabbit hole here.
There's too many teams to really compare at that point. Basically, it boils down to it comes down to DFM are probably going to do best of against teams that are not incredibly ruthless early game without exposing themselves at the same time and stuff like that. So, which is again, that's a very powerful way to play. I think that PCS2, I think would be pretty okay at this point because PSG have been so dominant. I think the rest of it was a similar situation to DFM actually. I think PCS2 I think is looking okay if it's Beyond or crap. What's the other team? Is it Beyond or Marchi? I'm trying to remember. But I think that PCS2 is achievable. I think that LPL 4th seed is a bit doomed. EU, maybe if Rogue drops down, we can do that because they don't have the.
It can only be Rogue or Fnatic. But let's move on because
it's a bit too much of a vague question right now. It's too much vague.
Actually, moving on to something worlds related but different. Chimo asks us, would it be good for the LJL to have 2 world spots? Let's go DFM. Let's say DFM go through to groups. I don't think you can allow that. I think you need to completely
revamp minor regions.
What play-ins mean, as well also what worlds means. I think if you wanted to, you could do a very large open tournament sort of system, but that's where you also have to start allowing like a bunch of the ERLs to start auto-qualifying in.
You need to change the system,
change the fundamental system. Currently, no, though. I don't think now, DFM should be allowed a 1 seed.
Yeah, more of an internet. More of a Dota 2 international.
Yeah, and right now we have a very similar problem to something. I mean, the sport which I tend to watch a lot is rugby union. We have a similar problem to that in terms of the top tier nations have a very solid international calendar, a lot of good stuff for the international viewer base. You don't really care about the secondary regions, though. The second tier is not very well catered towards, and I think that you look at minor regions in League. I think I said this on I've said this at some point, but like effectively any change which benefits minor regions it detracts from the main viewer base's experience of most large international events, which
During
is a huge
MSI,
problem.
we did this. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you look at Group A. I mean, I actually think that the play-in stage of MSI was very good. Actually, I think that's pretty okay. I think
we're a few people that really liked it. A lot of people
I think that
a lot
of people hated it basically because VCS couldn't make it, and that's completely fine. But if you strip away Group A, Group B and C actually had some really good games. I think that that was more than fine in terms of a format. I think the problem is, though, now you've removed Rift Rivals. Where is the secondary level of competition for Tier 2 nations? Because you don't have that. Previously we've had the LJL actually beat VCS in Rift Rivals, right? I mean, DFM have beaten Gigabyte Marines. You know, they've I think it was like OCE, Japan, Vietnam all played together, and they played on one of those things. Of course, Rift Rivals was a failed product. I don't think it was well marketed. If you don't have anything to give a wider exposure for these Tier 2 nations to an international competition, you're not really going to see growth from them. You're waiting for miracle stories.
Not at all. No.
So 2 seeds for them right now. It would help the region. Terrible for international competition, though.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that's partly why play-ins are important, though. Because it is actually a space for some international competition. I think it would be nice to have some more. How do I put this?
I mean, I think it'd be nice to have a play-ins tournament. Like, do you get what I mean by that, Sam?
Yeah, exactly. Or just some more regular international events between things. Obviously, Rift Rivals got a bit dull for major regions, but like an ability to kind of go on tour with some of your best teams to various regions for some matchups there would potentially be quite cool. But that requires more freedom in the calendar.
Yeah, maybe RiotCon, maybe something in the winter, maybe when they one day do something like that, maybe they can do that, but till we see
like an FA Cup type deal where just like everyone plays and hope for it.
I'd love to see that in League. Love to see that.
I think that'd be smashing, and doing it at something like RiotCon would be the perfect place to do that, because you could literally hold it for like a full week, and you could start it at the very beginning and end it at the end of the con, and you could do that for Valorant and all these other games and cross market, and it's all great. Snoop Kappa asks us, do you think DFM can take LCK 4th seed in play-ins? No. I do not. I think LCK 4th seed beats DFM at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know who it's.
It's likely to be. It's HLE, Sandbox, or
oh, we could be those.
It could also potentially be Genji T1. So
Genji would be a little tougher. T1 would be a little tougher. But I think it's doable actually.
If they beat Damwon or not.
Yeah.
Right?
So if T1 win, then they are first seed. Damwon a second seed. Genji are third or fourth, because it depends on who wins in the regional bracket, I think, at that point. And basically the same way. So T1 Genji can be first, third, fourth. So, I don't know if... I mean, fourth, I think, is achievable. I think fourth is achievable between HLE or Sandbox or something like that.
Like the thing is, even against someone who's a bit higher ranked, we already proved that these players are mechanically talented enough to at least throw some punches, right? That's always proven earlier in the year. Could I guarantee wins there? Would I even put that up as a likely chance? No, but I don't think it's out of the question either, which is a nice thing to think.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally for myself, I just look at it and go, I have to think. That's not good. That's not good. I don't want to have to think about DFM winning or not. Like, I mean, that's where I just come down with it. So hey ho. During our broadcast, during our broadcast last week, we got asked the question in our Twitch chat, which Middlecott happened to do. So Middlecott via C9 lose to Weebs at MSI. Great name, by the way. Do you guys expect DFM to be able to keep a hold of Aria during the off-season? I imagine a couple of LPL/NA teams are ready to shell out some big ones to snatch him, as per usual. So we actually talked about this with Corporal when he had an interview with us. He said there's always going to be on the cards, but don't expect any form of, even if DFM do well at Worlds, don't expect some kind of Japan exodus losing all of its players. He's very confident that the region is going to be absolutely fine, and that there probably isn't, because all these players have already been approached once or twice before, and they haven't taken it. So don't worry too much.
Aria is the unique case where he is. Well, he's
actually having a It's his first time on a global stage,
because he debuted in 2019, and this is the first time he's been on a top tier team and could actually strut his stuff. MSI obviously made some waves. That LeBlanc gave us Infinity was like absolutely nuts, and a couple of his Zoe performances, and what he did against Perks, and you could argue that he was the better player than Perks in their matchups versus C9, for instance.
I would say he was.
I would say that. I mean,
Not
I think
biased.
that he is the most valuable player in the LJL by a long way. I don't think we're going to see an exodus. There's a chance we see Aria leave, though, a significant one. I'd say.
I mean,
Particularly when you look at the level of some of the mid laners of LCK, you go to you get him into a mid-low tier team there. There's a good chance he goes there.
Yeah, I'll put in the caveat that, of course, Japan tends to be quite insular culture. So like actually a lot of Japanese people don't really want to leave Japan a lot of the time. Partly because speaking another language is quite difficult because no one really understands Japanese outside of Japan that regularly.
Yep.
And lots of other things like that. So that does affect things as well. So that's worth bearing in mind as well, particularly for Japanese residents such as they are.
That was a big call from Corporal, actually. I completely forgot about. Well done, Sam. Well done. I mean, I think the other thing is also, like we've already mentioned around the Japanese players. I think the other thing is, if we're going to lose people, it's going to be the imports that we have brought into this region. And I mean, the obvious ones that are really coming to me is like Honey having a breakout performance this year. And if eyes are on the region, he's one. Hollow would be another one, another AD carry, I think. And Mujin, we've already been seeing V3 junglers come in for a year or so, and then they wander off afterwards after having normally a pretty good season on V3. So I mean, if this is just a stepping off point, hey ho, we could see that. Though I don't think we're gonna lose Gang or Steel. I think they're just too integrated within the system, and it's similar to what we mentioned, which Sam mentioned about the Japanese teams and players not wanting to go out because they have to. The culture's different, and the food and the language and everything. They like what they've like, and they're doing what they want to do. So why would you give that up? Chimo also asked us, gentlemen, is there a world where DFM doesn't make it to finals? Has Axis shown enough, or is V3 playoff bus strong enough? So we've already mentioned that, right?
There is a non-insignificant chance. It's not high. It would never get more than 15% for me, but it is there.
All right. Sam, still on the 5 to 10% sort of train, yeah?
Yeah, I think it probably is about 10%.
Yeah,
but that for me is like, I think a little bit of, actually, Jesters have turned up to play. Fantastic. So that's my anyway.
Lower bracket also has to play against angry DFM now.
That's always a pleasure.
We know what that went. Like we've seen V3 get the angry DFM once before, and they had Boogie. So good luck to you. Hopefully Reiner can continue his playoff buff. Interesting comparison between V3 and DFM. When DFM looked really good in their series, Gang was looking really good. And when they weren't looking so good, Gang was having maybe a slightly off series, and it's just a weird comparison between the two support players and how when they look really good. Yeah,
I mentioned it already. It's this one.
Oh yeah. EX Kirby's gonna end us out with 2 questions. LJL OU Worlds Watch Party. Can we collectively drown our sorrows when DFM drowns out in play-ins?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do something. Whether it'll
we'll
be like
doing something.
Yeah, I don't know whether it would be like a watch party in terms of a Discord thing. I think we might prefer to do it on Twitch just to keep our numbers running on the off season. We might prefer to do that. But yeah, we'll do something if
we'll need to find out what we're even doing for Worlds.
As long as schedules work out, unless of course we get pinged to actually be on play-ins as an LJL rep, something like that. That'd be
or if a lovely gaming bar or something wants to hook us up.
That's true. Actually,
have us host a podcast and a live reaction, live stream us doing it, so we still get the Twitch, but then we get the audience reaction as well. I mean, hey, it's a two-prong approach.
We'd really love to do something special for it.
We absolutely would. But it also does all depend on if someone goes over DFM. Well, we're gonna have to figure that one out, gentlemen.
Yep.
But that will draw us to a close for season 2, episode 28 of the podcast. Next week, gentlemen, we will be having our round 3, our semifinals, and our finals. It's gonna be a lot to kind of unpack, because that's gonna well and truly kind of set us up. We will have the V3 versus Axis series, so we'll be able to kind of judge who's going to be playing off against the FM. Also, I mean, very quickly, gentlemen, I want to just grab your last second predictions. Who's going to win, Axis or V3? I know we're going to do this on the actual pre-game show, but very quick, who's your favorite for coming into that match?
Right now, I think V3, thinking about it a bit more.
Okay. Initialize yourself. Come on. Come on.
I'm gonna go with Axis, but I
Okay.
don't feel happy about it.
See, I'm fucking on fire. I don't mind who wins this one. I got my V3 boys, or I get my Axis boy. Like, I win both ways, lads. I don't think you realize this. These are like my two main teams. Like, I'm fucking loving life.
I've got to get away. The smugness. Everywhere.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
None of this.
But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, you can catch this podcast on all audio streaming platforms, YouTube. We stream all of these over on our Twitch channel, so you go over and give us a follow over on there. Maybe even hit that subscribe button if it's already appeared. Who knows? We're not sure when it's going to appear underneath there. It might already be there. Not right now, though, right live. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Episode 28 in the books, gentlemen. We're done. That's it. Go home. You don't need to be here. The podcast's over. Go home. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, that was a lot louder than I thought it would be, and it's not the sound which I thought it would be either, but yes, that.
Bye.
Bye.